Berto, let's talk about the movie The Sound of Metal. What do you say?
Let's do it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist, and I'm also a professor.
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I sell hybrid and electric surfboards.
So I'm just going to review the plot, and spoiler alert, but it's not really spoilable because it doesn't really have a plot. So if you don't plan on watching it, or if you do plan on watching it, probably wouldn't ruin it to hear the story. Anyway, so Ruben and Lou are in a band, and they are touring. They're in a RV, and they're going across the United States, and it's a two-person band. And Ruben, the drummer, begins to lose his hearing, and Ruben gets upset. Lou, Ruben's girlfriend, doesn't know what to do, and we learn that he's also in recovery from addiction. Ruben, who is losing his hearing, enters a home with other deaf people. He doesn't like it at first, but soon warms up to the others. His mentor tries to get him to accept being deaf. Like he says things like, us deaf people, we don't see being deaf as something that we need to cure. And you need to accept the fact that you're deaf now. And he also tries to help him just sit and just be at peace with yourself, regardless of being deaf or not. Just be at peace. Ruben sneaks out of the home and gets an ocular implant. He gets kicked out of the home because of his ocular implants. He travels to Paris to find Lou again. He tries to return to his old life, to be with Lou and to be in a band, and he realizes that he can't go back to that old life. And he, at the very end, turns off his implants and sits quietly. So, Berto, what is the moral of this story, first of all?
It's a hard one because, on the one hand, if I interpret the ending scene, the way I thought about it was, when he was in the home, and his mentor was trying to ask him, hey, all the times that you've been in that room where you're supposed to be writing and essentially finding calm, did you ever find calm? Were you ever at ease or at rest? And then, he basically doesn't really answer the question, which means no. But I felt like in that last scene, he takes off in desperation. He takes off the cochlear thing, the implants, or not the implants, but the little device, and is all of a sudden at peace in a weird way, because he's sort of realizing his new reality is his new reality. So I feel like if you were going to take that as the takeaway, it would be that if you thrash around denying your reality, you're not going to be able to move forward, or it's going to be very difficult. But if you pause and you take in your new reality, then you might actually be okay, or at least be able to move forward. That's the sense I got.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that was similar to what I pulled. I pulled away maybe even a more general thing, which is that not only just accepting your reality, but just being who you are, or being at peace, being still. I found myself at the very end breathing for a second and just saying, yeah, because there's so much that we are in constant, these constant hamster wheels in our brain. Okay, got to get this done. Got to make sure we clean the house. Got to make sure that my body looks the right way. Got to make sure that I get all those things. Got to make sure I please the boss. Got to make sure I look at my finances. Got to make sure that I pay those bills. Got to make sure that, I have the right thoughts in my head. Got to prepare, get the right degree, get the right car. And we rarely, because of our materialistic society, are encouraged to just sit and just stare out the window and be in, to some extent, silence, metaphorical silence or actual silence. And I thought that was an interesting, I didn't know where the movie was going at the end. I was lost and actually, to be honest, I didn't like the last half of the movie. But the very last scene I really liked because I felt like it really resonated with something that I like to be reminded of. So I want to get into the accuracy of the movie and microaggressions against deaf people. But Berto, let's just first talk about the movie. What ranking? How many Bertos out of 10 would you give it?
I would give it a 6.
Me too. Why would you give it a 6?
There are moments of the movie, when the movie starts, that whole first sequence when he is losing his hearing.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that was so impactful and hard to watch.
Yeah.
It was like a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode times 11. I was sitting there like squirming. I could barely watch because we're musicians.
Yeah.
Hearing's important to us. And I was just imagining, I was putting myself in that situation, just going, and just the reality. And they did it so well where he's sitting there in denial in the moment. We hear what he's hearing.
Yeah.
You can imagine if you're sitting at the store and all of a sudden you can't hear, everything gets dead quiet. For a second, you're just like, oh, I probably just gotta like yawn or something, like, and then you're just in denial, but then it keeps going and you're thinking, but he's not saying anything to anyone because as soon as he makes it verbal, it's real and he just can't. And I was sitting there, oh my God, so good. I also, it went in a direction that I did not expect. See, I was thinking that the movie was going to be more about him like finding a way to still do music or whatever. Definitely wasn't what the movie was about. It went in this other direction, and that was interesting. There was something about it that felt uneven to me, and maybe that's why you were feeling like, because it, if I were charting my interest level, it definitely like peaked early, and then sort of like squandered down, and then kind of oscillated. And then towards the end, it picked up again. Definitely similar to what you're saying. So that overall, I feel very well acted, very impactful, some deep messages. It could have been maybe rearranged a little bit. There's some things I would have spent less time on maybe. So that's why for me, it wasn't an amazing movie in spite of all those good things about it.
Yeah. When you and I watched Roma, we had the complete opposite reaction, but we have the identical reaction to this movie. I can't really add anything. You said
so weird.
You said everything that I would have said in the beginning. I was like, oh my God, this is so interesting and so devastating and so well acted and well directed, and I'm really in this guy's experience, the way the sound design was. But then the second half, I'm like, okay, I find myself, looking at my phone, and then when he goes to Paris, I'm like, where is this movie? He's sitting in this room with his girlfriend's father, and they're having some conversation about what? And then he goes to this party, and even the interaction between him and his girlfriend when they were in Paris, I'm like, what's happening right now? And I think I understood the subtleties that were being communicated, but it was too jumbled that I just didn't really understand. But then the very last scene, I was like, okay. So yeah, if it was the first 45 minutes, I would have given it an 8. But the second 45 minutes, I give like a 3 because it just didn't have any oomph to it. It didn't have a story.
I will say that I think both you and I might be victims of what the movie is trying to point out, but not, I agree. Actually, the whole Paris thing, I will say that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about when he went to the camp.
Because that the first bit of that I kind of liked because it. Oh,
okay, fair enough. Okay, so for me, I was thinking, I kind of liked the beginning of the camp, but then I got a little bored. But I'm kind of guilty about what he was guilty of because in my mind, I'm like, that's not the movie. Wait a minute. No, forget all this stuff. I want him to like overcome his adversity and like he could still be the greatest drummer in the world. And then the movie's like, that's not reality. That's not what's happening. And I'm like, but I want it to be the reality. So I'm kind of guilty of what he's saying. But then I will say, in spite of that admission, there is a point at which the movie actually starts losing the plot a little bit. And right. It's almost like if it were a TV series and you had a little more context, but instead it starts adding too many little elements like, right. Oh, the dad never liked him. It's like, wait. Like, fine, but...
Yeah, when he went to Paris, I was like, did I miss something? Like, was there reference to this earlier on? What's happening? And I just thought it was really just drawn out. The whole... Yeah. it felt like the writer had some bone to pick with Paris or the aristocrat of Paris or something. I just didn't understand, like, why are we here and why is this happening? But on another level, if you're in the mood, kind of like Roma, I think you can just kind of let those scenes wash over you, and I think it could be enjoyable. But I wasn't really into it. Rotten Tomatoes, Berto, what do you think?
Ooh, critics gave it a 96.
98, very close. Audience?
85.
90, pretty close. Okay, so accuracy. What do you think was accurate and what do you think was inaccurate regarding deafness or hearing loss in this movie?
Well, I don't know how suddenly it can come on. I'm imagining it can vary dramatically in how suddenly it can come on. I do think that one thing they represented well was how a fish out of water he would have been, because, if you're an adult and you have to learn a whole new way to communicate and be. In fact, they didn't spend enough time almost on it, because there was a scene where he's like, and then the couple scenes go by and now all of a sudden he's actually, talking and stuff. But as far as the implant, at first I was really annoyed because I'm thinking, oh my God, so no one explained to him, or did he just not listen to how this was going to work? It's not some magic. Of course, it's not going to be identical to what his hearing was. It's going to be difficult. It's going to take a long time for him to get comfortable with. And I was very annoyed. At the same time, having recently been through dramatic medical issues, I am actually sadly not as opposed to that scene or that sequence, because there's so many things they don't tell you, and so many things that are like wishy-washy, and so many things that don't work one way for someone. And so I'm still kind of annoyed, because in reality, like, after the movie, I went to the site, they show, like, I went to a couple sites about cochlear implants, and they clearly lay out, like, the caveats and who this is for and what it doesn't do and all these things. But it is maybe believable that in his state of sort of mania, he's sort of like, yeah, whatever, just do the thing. And maybe they did explain it and he didn't pay attention. And that's fair. It's just that when they turned it on, he seemed so, like, disappointed by the lack of, like, normal hearing. And then the doctor in that scene, I was like, this is the extent of your bedside manners for him.
Right. So I looked up some sites from audiologists and deaf people for the accuracy elements. And they comment on some of the things you're talking about. So the first thing is that audiologists and those in the deaf community seem to like the movie overall. It raises awareness. There's some extreme accurate portrayals. For example, a lot of the actors in the deaf home, in the deaf school, are not actors. They're just regular kids or regular people that are in the deaf community, and they're like, when he's teaching drums, though, you could tell those are actual deaf kids. Those are actual, and there was actually improv. You could tell that wasn't scripted. And so anyway, point is that audiologists and deaf people in the deaf community, they like it. It raises awareness. There's a lot of accuracy, the way it sounds, the way it feels, like when he goes to the party. And as soon as he had the ocular implants, I thought, okay, well, at some point he's going to go to a crowd, because this is one of the problems with these that I don't know that much about it, but I knew enough to know that when those, our hearing, when it is optimal, it's integrated with our brain such that we actually can mute certain things that we're hearing. Like, Berto, you and I are at a party, for example, and you and I it's loud. There's music playing, there's conversations, there's a TV blasting, and all of it is pumped into our eardrums. But somehow you and I can understand what each other is saying. How can we do that? Well, it's because our brain can zero in on the sound frequencies or the context of what the words are, as opposed to the TV, as opposed to the thumping bass, as opposed to conversations across the room. And in the same way that, and I do this sometimes, I'll be talking to someone and I'll hear a conversation. I was at Mother's Day with my family, and all of us were together, all vaccinated, so we could all be without masks, which is just a wonderful. Have you had that experience yet? Like a crowd of vaccinated?
No.
Well, because you're not vaccinated fully yet. It is a glorious experience, my friend. Like, it is transformational to just sit around with my entire, because my family, we love to get together, you know what I mean? And
Right.
all the cousins and everyone. Anyway, but I was talking with someone, and then my mom was talking literally in the other room, and she said my name, and it registered in my brain. And then I switched from talking to someone right in front of me to hearing a conversation in another room.
Right.
So in my brain, in addition to, a numerous other input, there are two conversations I could pay attention to, but I can only pay attention to one. And my brain, if you would have asked me, was my mom talking in the room, I would have said, I don't know. But as soon as she said my name, my brain went, what's going on in the other room? And but these implants don't work in chorus apparently very well with that brain ability, and all of the information gets shoved into your brain, and so you can't differentiate between anything, and so it's just a lot of noise that's just coming into your head, and so I was wondering, like, when are they going to have the scene at the party? And so apparently that's pretty accurate as well.
Yeah, these things are going to get dramatically better, anyways, with any luck over the next few years, because they have. So you can have the microphone, the super high resolution microphone, and at the same time you're detecting the electronic signal, or not electronic, but the electric signals being actually generated by your real ears, and then you put that all in a model, in a machine learning model, and then that will improve dramatically because what happens is, this bypass is basically just feeding electricity straight into your brain instead of the waves getting processed. But that electricity is essentially a super crude digital approximation of what actually the analog ear is processing and delivering. But the more they can train these models, it'll get significantly better. But in the meantime,
there might be
this is what people can have.
There might be like a setting, like, and maybe they have this, of like, I'm at a party, focus on conversation frequencies instead of music frequencies. Anyway, so inaccuracies. This is from a few different websites and Reddit and stuff. So one, which you mentioned, was that loud noise exposure, which was the implication that, him playing in a band and being a drummer, does not cause sudden hearing loss like that typically. It can, but it doesn't typically. Typically, it's slow over time, like what you and I experience,
Right.
being advanced. That, because he went from seemingly totally fine hearing, literally within 2 seconds, boom,
He's gone.
Almost complete loss of hearing. And a lot of people online were saying, in a case like that, he needs immediate treatment. He needs to go to a ear, nose, and throat person, steroids, because you can actually reverse that typically. And there are treatments that you can get. It's not like it's gone forever, but the way the movie treated it is like, well, it's gone and he's deaf now, essentially.
Right. Like the neurons died overnight.
Right. It can happen, but it doesn't usually happen that way. The other thing that a lot of people were saying was that, like what you were saying, the professionals were extremely cold and also, of course, didn't use the right lingo, which they never do in these movies. But the way they came across to him, the patient, was just extremely cold, which is so common for movies and TV, for therapists. I tune into that, but, a lot of physicians, like, well, son, you're never going to walk again. Anyway, moving on to the next patient, that kind of thing.
Again, though, I will say that based on my recent experiences, people are people, and it varies dramatically.
Yeah,
some people have it,
banner.
some people don't.
Yeah. Also, apparently, it should have been mentioned to him that he could possibly use hearing aids. There was no trial of,
Right.
You don't need cochlear implants right away. Like, you should at least try hearing aids, because he did seem to have some hearing. It wasn't completely gone. And with hearing aids, you just crank it up, and you can actually hear pretty well for some people.
By the way, the other thing that bugged me is, as a musician, I don't know if this bugged you.
Oh, we'll get to that. Well, okay, we'll get to all the music and stuff in a second.
Oh, no. This wasn't about them, but just in the moment where they're trying to adjust his implant, when they turn it on, where the doctor turns it on, I was so frustrated because it seemed like, and maybe it's because it's an abbreviated scene for the movie, but they gave up almost immediately. There were clearly different settings, like different bands or frequencies.
Right.
She tried one, it's like, no. She tried another, no. And then she tried a third, it's like, no. Oh, well, anyways, it's going to be bad. You're going to have to get adjusted to it.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait.
Yeah.
And plus, it seemed like there was no volume control on the thing. It's like, wouldn't you want to like start with it kind of low so it doesn't irritate him immediately? I don't know. Like, it just seemed like...
Another thing about that scene that I felt was inaccurate is he's a musician, and he understands music, and he's like, because it's clearly a lot of treble. It's real tinny. You know, that's a word that we would use is.
And he's a mixer. Like, he's got a mixer in his hand.
He understands. He understands EQs, and so the word. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like, I thought he was going to say tinny. Like, he's like,
sure.
He's like, it sounds a little. He's trying to search for words, and the only
it's the
word.
Sound of metal. It's the sound of metal.
Yeah, the only word that he could come up with was high. He's like,
it's like
it
high,
sounds,
you know.
it sounds, you know. And I thought, surely he's going to say tinny or trebly or too many high frequencies or crackly in the high end. He says high, which is something that a non-musician would say. You know what I mean? I was like, he wouldn't say that. He'd say, there's so many words for crackly, high, tinny sound. Anyway, also the premise that insurance would not cover the implants is also false. That most insurance does cover it for sure. Yeah, okay. Some doesn't, but most do. Also, that deaf communities usually do not reject people with implants. Some will, but usually they don't. And you know, it was sort of implied like us in the deaf community have accepted our deafness, and those who get implants are ostracized and kicked out of the house. And that a lot of people did not like that scene as well.
You know, one thing that's hard for me to understand, and I guess this is the way it must have to be, whenever I see the scenes with the addiction aspects where they're trying to help him, and this isn't just in this movie, I always get annoyed by how inflexible they are. Like, you can't have a visitor, like you can't have this, you can't smoke a cigarette, whatever. Now I realize that that's because, you know, addiction is almost impossible, and if they don't have these ridiculously fine lines that they have to walk, it might not help them at all. But as a viewer, it's so frustrating. I'm like, come on, let him have something. You know, let him have his visitor or whatever.
Right. So I also looked up an article related to this movie, and written by someone who is deaf named Sarah Novich, and they wrote about common microaggressions that deaf people experience. So, you know, Berto, as a Colombian, a microaggression you experience is, oh, sure, cocaine, or, are you here legally? You know, what other kind of microaggressions do you experience as a Colombian American?
Is your Uncle Pablo?
Yeah.
That was a common one. I mean, nowadays not as much. When I first moved here, I don't think there was someone who didn't say that. Like, it was crazy. And and in general, it was language barrier. You know, I remember that was a thing, language barrier.
Meaning, you've told me that story, like you were at work at a meeting and you didn't seem to understand something, even though you're fluent in English. And because you're Colombian, they're like, oh, it must be a language barrier.
Yeah, they confused me, like maybe socially awkwardly trying to get someone to a meeting because I was told to bring them to the meeting with me not understanding English. It's like, okay. And then the other thing is, when my mom was trying to enroll me in school, she's like, okay, so he is bilingual and all these things, and he's at the school there is really good. And then they were like, Well, I mean, we should start him in the lower class, just to see how things go. Plus, he's gonna have to adjust to the language. And she'd be like, no, he speaks like better than me. Like he's fluent. They're like, okay, well, it's just, and they wouldn't believe her. Like they wouldn't listen to her. So that was hilarious. Because yeah, as soon as I moved up and I started classes, the next parent conference, like, we might have to move him up in the math class and like a few other, and it was like they just didn't believe her.
Right. Right. So Sarah Novich writes online the following. When I meet a hearing person, I immediately begin steeling myself for their inevitable release of what I call the triad of microaggressions against deaf people. Can you imagine what these are, Berto? What the triad of microaggressions against deaf? So,
Yes.
she meets someone, it becomes known that she's deaf, and they say
I would
something.
imagine they get in there to talk to them. They get right in their face and speak really loudly and over enunciate and move their lips really bigly.
She didn't mention that, but I could see that. Anything else?
Maybe it would be the let's see.
Maybe in conversation, like 15 minutes into a conversation, something that frequently a person would say.
This is how blind I am to it.
Well, think about what you would say and then later regret it. Like you're somehow able to communicate with a deaf person.
And they're like reading my lips or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you're using a, text to speech to text thing. And, what question just kind of emerges from your cultural space that you imagine they get a lot,
I might say, were you born deaf?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like that might be one thing.
Yeah, I wonder.
I might say, I might just say, are your, like, the whole, like, are your other senses enhanced or something?
Yeah.
Like,
are you like
the opposite
Daredevil?
Of, Daredevil, yeah.
Yeah.
Or I might say, what happened? I don't know. Like, I might say, like, what does it feel like to not hear? I don't know. Something like that. I mean, I wouldn't really say these things, but I might.
Yeah. So the last one is in line with one of the things. So she says, number one, incredulity at deaf independence.
Like, so I can't believe, oh, wow, you're deaf?
Or, well, with your independence. So she says, for example, you can drive? So there's always, like if she drives up and she gets out of her car, she walks into a party and they're like, wait, you just drove up here by yourself. You can drive? So that's one
But
microaggression.
that is actually a good question I had as I was watching the movie, because in my mind, don't you need to be able to hear sirens or hear loud honks or...
Yeah, I'm sure there's some way around it. I don't know what it is, but...
Okay.
Essentially the microaggression of you must never leave the house because you're completely incompetent. There's just no possible way you could live like a regular human without being able to hear that assumption. Number two is, which I found to be very interesting, which is comparison to an animal. Like, oh, my cousin has a deaf dog.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that seems...
Okay, so she's saying she gets this all the time. This is,
Well, I wonder if with a blind person, people might be like, oh, you're like a bat or something, Right. Like, it's like, I'm an animal. Like, I'm another...
Yeah, right. And the third one is intimation that death is preferable to deafness. For example, I would just die without music.
Okay, so I'm surprised you thought I was going to come close to these. These are, I mean, you're right that inside I might be thinking that, because the reality is you would think, well, not I would rather die, but rather like, I can't imagine. Right. I can't imagine.
So I actually, when I was watching this movie, I had that thought of like, oh my God, what would I do if I went deaf? Because podcasting, music... Yeah. What would I do? I mean, my life would be over. But that implies that my life would be over. My life would not be over. And that's what deaf people are saying, is just because you're deaf does not mean your life is over. It's not a death sentence. There's plenty of enjoyment of life and plenty of things you can do. while being deaf. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. And don't treat me like it would be the end. Don't look at me and go like, oh my God, if I were you, I would kill myself. Like, don't think that, don't say it. It's not fair to me. It's not true. Don't be so obtuse, that kind of thing.
So in a very small way, I in no means mean to equate these things, but I have experienced a little version of this in my last 6 to 9 months. Because Graves' disease, which is what I was diagnosed with and stuff, is not curable. There is no cure. No one knows how it comes about, and there is no cure. And it can be really bad. You can die from it. So I don't know how close I came, but I was in really bad shape. Okay. So, from my mind, this was a period of adjustment to kind of realize kind of that similar feeling of, there must be, what pill do I take? What do I do? Like that manic feeling of like, what's the solution, doc? Just tell me, I'll do it, whatever. And just slowly realizing, oh, this is something that's happened to me. And there is no pill. I mean, there is a pill to make me not like die, but I'm here. This is here to stay. Okay. And then I had to realize, oh man, I might have to have like a thyroidectomy. They're going to remove an organ from my body. And this is something that's happening to me. And it's like, it's like your brain has a hard time processing this. Like, this is my new reality. Like, I'm a person with this incurable disease that has to have an organ removed. Like, what? And of course, it would be so natural to be like, I don't want to carry on, or this isn't life, or my life has changed. And I belong to some support groups for these things, and man, there's some really difficult stories on there, worse than mine. And they're like, wow, let alone something that is even, more day to day and kind of maybe more ostracized, all these things like losing your hearing and stuff. I can see how that would be. But then once you're actually the person going through it, guess what? It's like you got to get busy living or busy dying. Like life goes on. You have to take your pills. You have to go to the doctor, and it sucks and you don't feel great, but you have to do it. And then for people to then come in and be like, and this has happened to me a few times, like, this is what's happening to me. And the reaction naturally is like, oh my God. Because I know what's happening in their head. They're going, oh geez. And I'm guilty of this, man. When you tell me your stories, when people tell me the stories, I go, oh Jesus, oh God, I don't want to even imagine that. And I'm realizing now, I'm like, oh, that's not good. Like, does that help the person feel better about their situation?
Yeah, empathy is good, obviously.
Right.
But assuming that the person has basically crossed a line where suicide is the only answer is one, an overreaction, and two, hurtful. Of course. It gives the other person this feeling like, I believe you are a worthless human, or you're such a sad sack, you might as well just die, because what's the point of living, Yeah. Empathy and feeling other people's feelings, for sure, yeah. Okay, so when we get back from the break, which we're about to take, then we will talk about what we liked about the movie, and also about the cast and crew, and also a little bit about being in a band and losing our hearing ourselves. Berto, what do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, we're back from the break. So if one of those not so good bedside manner audiologists were to convince the listeners right now to become a patron of the podcast, what would they sound like?
Hello. So, as you know, you've lost your hearing and your sight, and you also, we had to amputate your left pinky and attach it to your shoulder. But the thing is that these things happen. And look, there's no point. What's happening here? Why are you making that face? Look, bad things happen to bad people all the time. So you just got to get over this. I will give you some good news. How's that? I'll give you some good news. Now that you're going to have a lot of free time, because I don't even know what you're going to do with your life, I guess. Why don't you go to this one site and become a patron of the Psychology in Seattle podcast? You might as well listen. Oh, you can't. Oh, geez. I don't even know. You know what? Just become a patron and take 2 of these and never call me again.
All right, let's do some OPPs, old patron praise. These
OPP.
5 individuals became patrons of the podcast in September of 2016. Every episode, I've been trying to highlight people who have stuck with us through thick and thin through all the years. These people started as a patron in September 2016. We got good old Darren from Barrie, Ontario. We got
Ontario.
Good old Claudia. So I think at least 3, maybe 4 of these 5 I've communicated with. So Claudia from, I think, Denmark, who is actually a more deserving listener. And then we got good old Rachel. We know Rachel, Berto.
Hi, Rachel.
From Auburn, Washington, who's also a more deserving listener. We met Rachel in person. We've emailed a lot with her. She came to one of our live shows. I think she's active on the Facebook fan page. So thank you, Rachel, for sticking with us through all these years. We got Tammy from Weymouth, Massachusetts. And we got Renee, who I'm pretty sure I've interacted with Renee from Decatur, Alabama. So thank you, Darren, Claudia, Rachel, Tammy, and Rachel for being patrons since September 2016. You are OPPs. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk about being in a band and whatnot. So Berto and I, we've been in a lot of bands over the years, sometimes together. And what I will tell you is that the drums are the loudest things on the universe.
So
they are so loud. Like unless you're playing like jazz with brushes or something. Like for a number of years, maybe 5 or 10 years, I played the drums myself and set out to learn how to play drums. I couldn't stand how loud the drums were when I was playing them. I actually would play not with I don't know what they call them, but they're not the brushes? But they're it's like a bundle of sticks. I don't know what they call them.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
They hit the drums a lot quieter. It's still pretty loud, but it's a lot more muted. And yeah, drums are just, and you and me, Berto, we would be in bands and we'd be jamming with our guitars and bass and singing, and then the drummer would show up and we couldn't hear ourselves anymore because the drummer is just so loud.
Do you remember how offended Michael got when I put I put that barrier in front of him?
Yeah. So Berto and I were in this band, and there's this drummer, Michael, lovely guy, and
amazing drummer.
Yeah, what was his last name? Michael McDonald. Wasn't his name
Remember?
Michael McDonald?
Michael McDonald.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the voice or the white lightning, or what do they call it? Anyway, velvet lightning, or so. I'm getting mixed up with Mel Torme, who was anyway. Point is that Berto was particularly upset. Like, you have a lower tolerance than I do for the loudness of drums. Like,
absolutely.
Like, I'm okay with drums being loud a little bit, but
I've
really
always had a hard time with loud noises.
Yeah, and you got these plexiglass barriers to put up. Sometimes you'll see these at shows. You'll see this plexiglass barrier in front of the drum set, and it's to deaden the sound a little bit.
That's right.
So what did you do, Berto?
So I was like, I got it, and at first he kind of went along with it, and and he was behind the thing, and I just remember him like saying to me, I think we did it maybe 2 practices, and then he's like, I can't play behind this, like how dare you, like. It was like,
don't
so
put baby in the corner.
Exactly. So I'm like, fine, sorry. But man, that was hard. And so I tell you, I was so happy the moment we switched to, first of all, headphones, and the fact that Carlos played a digital set except for the cymbals, but then with the headphones it was okay. Oh my gosh, my life improved dramatically.
Yeah. So yeah, I won't go into the weeds on that, but we could suddenly hear ourselves now. Yeah. Like when it, especially vocals, it is so hard to get a good vocal volume that will compete with drums. It is almost impossible. Being on stage, I've been on good stages, I've been on bad stages. it is almost impossible to, and singing is the one thing on stage that you need to be able to hear yourself do. You could play guitar, you could play drums and not hear yourself. You cannot sing if you can't hear yourself. You will be completely out of tune.
Yeah.
And until I got in-ear monitors, which actually used your system, I could not sing on key. You would come to some of my shows, and I'm sure you were nice to me afterwards. But I sometimes people would record audio or video, and I would listen back to it. I'd be like, I'm not anywhere near the note because I'm literally putting breath through my vocal cords, but I can't hear anything that I'm saying. And I'm just like, I hope I'm near the note. I really just don't know. Or you end up screaming so loud to overcome the drums. And, because everyone said, well, the guitars are loud too. No, the guitars are trying to compete. If you don't have drums in the room, the guitars are a tenth the loudness. Like if you just plug your guitar into an amp, you do not want to turn it up to drums level. You have it down at a regular volume, and you could probably sing without a microphone in front of a guitar and be okay. But you add the drums and the guitars and the bass, they have to go up, and the vocals just disappear.
Absolutely.
But then, Berto, you got these in-ear monitors, and so for people out there, you might see like Beyonce or something with these. They look like headphones that are molded to the inside of the ear, and they are. Berto and I did this. You didn't do this. I actually went to an audiologist, and they
got your own little mold.
Yeah, they like put putty in my ear and waited for it to, solidify.
I actually did it. I did it, but I never got the thing. I have the molds still, but I never actually ended up getting the custom. It
really works too, and what it does double duty. On one hand, it makes it so you can hear yourself because it pumps your own vocals it pumps whatever mix you want to, but I just had pure vocals in my ears. The other thing it does is it completely shuts off the music to the room. Like you can't hear, so that's the other thing I want to bring up, which is that, when you and I started out in bands, the obvious solution is earplugs. There have been earplugs for decades, but how did you feel about earplugs?
No, it's terrible. I can't sing with earplugs.
Yeah.
And like here, I have recordings, like you were saying, I have recordings of myself from when I used to sing either to just a monitor and or with earplugs. It is unlistenable too. I can't believe, I'm so embarrassed. I'm like,
me too, God.
Oh my God.
Me too. It's just the worst. Like, it's like I subjected the crowd to that monstrosity
and you can't
tonality.
tell because especially those low frequencies trick your brain unless you have some sort of weird perfect pitch vocal cords or something. By the way, you know why this is so funny?
Yeah.
Because you said double duty.
Now, what people do in big stages, like, Pearl Jam, is one, they will literally have dozens of audio vocal monitors, and two, you'll notice the drums are far away.
They're on a different level,
Yeah, they're all the way backstage, from, there's a separation, and, you get 10, 20 yards from the drum set, you can think straight. But if you're right next to a drum set and on a small stage, like the typical Seattle stage,
forget about it.
Like your brain is mush. Your eardrums are mush. And the fact that you and I can hear at all is actually, so getting back to earplugs, early on, I knew that if you blast your ears with loud noise, especially, back in the day, we would practice every day. Every day it was, and, or if I wasn't practicing, I was going to live shows myself, and, or listening to loud music on my stereo. And I was like, I probably should wear earplugs. I would put in earplugs, and I'd be like, what's the point? Like, I can't hear anything, or it's all bass. It's like, I might as well just not even do this. And then they have those special earplugs that are supposed to let a little bit of the treble in, but those never really worked for me. Did they work for you?
No, I never had good luck, and I didn't get good practices out of it because basically I would be straining my voice. I wouldn't hear right. And no, it was so I'm telling you, my life changed. So it makes me giddy. It makes me happy to think of missionary with our headphones. Oh my God, I
Right.
loved it so much.
So we basically, in that band, we basically all had in-ear, but we had over-ear monitors.
Yeah.
And you actually, yeah, I remember we basically, because we kind of had, our band was sort of like a little techno in a sense, like a techno look.
Right.
We had videos and we had lights and we had our headphones on. And so it kind of went with the show.
Fit, yeah.
Yeah.
It fit with the show.
Do you have tinnitus?
I have a little bit. If I'm in a completely quiet room, I certainly hear a tone.
What does it sound like?
It's kind of hard right now, but it's
I have it all the time. I have tinnitus. Like, it's just become my friend. From my understanding, I'm not as bad as other people. Like, there's some people where it's just like a piercing tone all the time. But for me, it's slightly staticky. Like, I can hear it right now. It's slightly staticky, but it's also like, oh God, I don't even know if it has a frequency. It's definitely in the high range somewhere. But it's more like high frequency, like a high snow sound, shh.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Interesting.
To the point where at night when I go to bed, I have to have a white noise machine because
to mask it.
Because if I hear it, it drives me crazy in the silence, But in my later years, I definitely started wearing earplugs. Like, for a while, I actually would carry earplugs in my wallet.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember me. I would always have earplugs with me.
Yeah. I do remember you pulling them out.
Yeah.
I was always so pissed off because I have tons of earplugs all over the place, but I would inevitably go out to see some show and I would get there and I'm like, I forgot my earplugs.
Yeah.
Luckily, they started selling. Actually, they started giving them away for free in a lot of shows. Sometimes selling them.
Yeah, but they always had the crappy, like super hard ones. It was never like the good soft ones.
Yeah.
The other thing that causes hearing loss is being being a podcaster with headphones. Like we've been.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like I know not us per se, but radio people. I will hear them talk about how their hearing will go bad because they will wear headphones when they're recording for monitors, and they will kind of crank it because it does feel like right now you and I are wearing headphones, but I have my headphones down kind of lower than I want it to be because I am trying to save my hearing.
If I watch The Sound of Metal,
right.
I'm scared.
If I crank to this to where I would want it to be, where it's more satisfying, it's louder, it actually is probably too loud.
And mixing, oh my gosh, mixing music can be devastating.
Right, because you need to listen to it loud. You can't listen to it quiet. You got to listen to it at, with all the energy coming out of the speakers. But
right.
So let's also nerd out a little bit about the depiction of the band in the movie. What did you see or what did you appreciate?
So it was a little White Stripe-ish, but not, the style was definitely metal, but...
Or punky.
Punk metal. I love the fact that, he was so into it. I did love that initially where he's like so intense. And there was this interesting interplay. I don't know exactly what the ultimate thing they were trying to convey because there was this kind of, in fact, at first I interpreted the scene of them playing together. I interpreted that their relationship was rocky. But then when they showed us their relationship, actually, they seemed to have a great relationship. So it was like, but they were pouring a lot of emotions into their playing. And I did love that idea that they were like, kind of, because the kind of music it was, they were playing off of each other. It was definitely not, a
4/4 kind of.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I really like that. It's not my style of music. I will say it was too far on the noise spectrum.
Yeah.
For me.
It was sort of art noise.
Yeah.
Music, yeah.
But they were clearly good at what they were doing.
Yeah, and they weren't lip syncing, either one of them, I could tell. And so often in these movies, it drives me nuts. Actually, musicians will be cast in the movie and they will still lip sync it. And it always drives me crazy.
Yeah.
And it's so obviously lip synced,
Yeah,
it's like
she was singing, he was playing.
Yeah, it's like, they're talking, and then all of a sudden they break out into song, and you can tell that the microphone is really close to their mouth, the reverb kicks in. It's just so dumb. But yeah, I could tell they were actually playing it. There actually wouldn't be any way for him to lip sync it because it was so freeform playing.
Yeah.
But I read an article that said she was actually playing as well. You couldn't really tell per se, but she was too.
Oh, the guitar.
Yeah, the woman playing, singing. But yeah, there were so many parts of the depiction of the band that were realistic. There were so many parts of it that I was like, oh my God, that is exactly how it is.
Absolutely. And I loved their van, dude. I was like, oh my God, he's got a recording studio. Well, they can travel from gig to gig.
The one thing that kind of bugged me was the massive mixing board. Like one of the things that drives me crazy.
Only 2 of them.
Yeah, there's 2 people in the band, and they probably aren't mixing like lots of different things. And plus, like, it's in his van, so why would he have a 24 channel mixing board in his van? You know what I mean?
I mean, the drums, he might be miking them, so
Yeah, okay.
That takes up that. You need at least a 16. I think a 16 is what you might need if you have a drum set.
But it always just kind of drives me nuts that people equate good recording studio scenes with the mixing board. They're always looking at the mixing board. You know what I mean?
You know what? This makes me miss my little rig. Remember, because we had the mixing board, we had the laptop,
but it was tiny. It was like a 12 channel, mixing board.
No. You're forgetting. I mean, tiny. It was a 16 channel.
Yeah. But it wasn't giant. It was like
no.
It was a regular rack. That, no. It was a regular rack.
Yeah, exactly.
Rack width. Yeah,
and a nice one, Allen and Heath.
Like 20 really was nice 18, 24 inches. Anyway, but yeah, so many parts of the band depiction was realistic. Like, and so many band. In fact, I would venture to say there is nothing that comes close to this movie. Can you think of any movie or TV that depicts what it's actually like to be in a band? Like the way this movie does. Can you think of anything that even comes close?
I feel like I don't know. There must be something, but
no.
This was really good.
Like, I think of Reality Bites, when Ethan Hawke is on stage. Yeah, I just remember I was in a band at the time, and I just remember watching Reality Bites. I was like, come on, but it's Hollywood,
right?
There were so many things about this that were so dead on, like the fact that they were playing in really small shows.
Yeah.
Like the shows they were playing were what looked to be like, 25, 40 people at the most. And that's when you're doing well,
Yeah.
Especially if you're on tour, because you're going to towns where you don't have any friends, Yeah. And so the fact that you have 25 randos in that town showing up to your gig, and the gigs are so unglamorous.
Right.
They weren't on a giant crocodile stage. They were on some of the shows. They looked like they were just in a room, and the people were just standing around them.
Yeah.
But that, particularly the punk scene, this is how it operates. You know what I mean? But you and I, even on our bands, even if we weren't in the punk scene, we literally would play parties in people's living rooms.
Yeah, like my living room.
Yeah,
your living room.
Do you remember that living room party we went to?
Yeah,
and. There were kids. There were like 4-year-olds at the party, and they were the dancing ones in front of us. And we're trying to be cool, like the Strokes or something. And
that's just, right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true. We're all like, yeah, this is cool. And
yeah, we weren't like the Wiggles. You know what I mean? We were trying to be hip and cool, and we're like 35 and playing to 7-year-olds.
We see all the adults kind of like clapping and excited, but they're not. It's not because of us. It's because the kids are dancing.
They're all like, yeah. But anyway, so the venues, the music, all the paraphernalia, like the posters and the T-shirts.
I like their band name, Blackgammon.
Yeah. And the merch and the RV and how it feels like you're just moving from town to... Did you ever tour at all like that?
No, I mean touring only in the sense that we took my missionary van and we drove it all the way from Olympia all the way up to Everett and stuff like that. So we would play venues that were far but we didn't go on a tour.
Like overnight or anything, yeah.
No.
So yeah, I really liked all that. What else did you like about the movie, Berto?
So in general, the acting and or non-acting, because like I get that a lot of people were just being themselves, but even the parts that didn't make so much sense to me, like everything felt legitimate. Nothing felt like, oh, these people are just, acting and stuff. And it's particularly his depiction. I was really feeling it. I guess if there was anything that didn't actually feel legitimate, it was a little bit of the interaction with the doctors. In spite of what I mentioned earlier about my mixed feelings, it did feel, I don't know, it felt somewhat artificial,
Yeah.
But anyways, but I loved his acting. I liked her. I liked the main mentor guy, the main deaf mentor guy. He was amazing.
The actor Paul Raci.
Yeah.
I thought when he first came on in the movie, I was like, that guy is so real. He has to be that guy. Like, yeah. I had to look him up, and it said that he was an actor. I was like, he seems like he is that guy. Right. He looks like that guy. He talks like that guy. Like, he can't be an actor.
This must be, they borrowed him from his real world.
Yeah, he is that, he works at that place. No, he's an actor.
And I loved, it takes so much skill and experience to be able to confront someone with the reality. And, you and I might disagree, or someone might disagree with the community ostracizing someone or not. But the point was that ability for him to just tell it very straight, like, hey, if you're going to do this, you have to leave today. And I was like, wow, man, that's someone who knows how to set boundaries. I was very impressed.
Yeah, and really well acted, really well directed, well written.
Yeah.
What I'll say about the movie, even though I give it a 6 out of 10, there's really almost nothing about the movie I didn't like. It was just funny about it. It was just like the second half just wasn't set up well. Like I wish they just the writer just would have given the director and actors like something to work with in that second half that just had more. Yeah. But you could also say, like I was saying earlier, life isn't like a plot line. Sometimes it is random and doesn't follow your typical hopes for a story. Sometimes that's what happens. And I think that's what the movie was trying to go for.
I hear you. So sure. And you know what I love about that? That in Pulp Fiction, freaking John Travolta's in the can and gets killed unglamorously, even though you're like, oh, these guys are so badass, and that's how he dies. Like, I like that, right? But that's still entertaining. What was odd for me was the whole storyline with the dad seemed like a sort of maybe a different movie we could have had.
Yeah, I literally... not literally, I need to stop using that word.
Figuratively.
Well, not even figuratively. I'm just sort of emphasizing. Why do I need to histrionically emphasize what I'm about to say? What I'm saying is that in that moment with the dad, with his girlfriend's dad, I thought I must have missed something, because why is he having this conversation with his girlfriend's dad? Like, what's going on? Is this a sequel? And that lasted for a good 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's when the movie lost me. I thought, I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah.
But
so
anyway,
it was unfortunate because
well acted,
Yeah.
Well delivered. I liked the scenes. I even kind of liked that house that they lived in. It had cool stuff. The books and the and the stacks and stuff. You just think, oh, this guy reads awesome books, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Real looking people. The sponsor scene when he gets on the phone with the sponsor in the beginning. Do you remember that scene?
Oh my gosh, that was awesome because he's so upset. All he had was a cigarette, and he does a great job. He's like, I think based on everything that's happened, like, and I'm sitting there with him. I'm like, yeah, I tend to agree with you, dude.
Yeah, that scene was so accurate. Like, the writer and the director, everyone must really know what conversations are like between people struggling with substance abuse and their sponsors when they are relapsing. Like, it was.
Oh, right.
It was so accurate. And Riz Ahmed. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I'm going to say Riz Ahmed. He just nailed it. The facial expressions, the emotion, you believed it. You believed that he was going through that. It was so spot on.
And I felt so annoyed for him because I'm like, stop making that face like there's a problem. Like there is a problem, but it's not the problem. You think that's the problem. And what are you saying to him? I'm like, I feel you. I feel you. I feel you.
Yeah.
At the same time, I feel what they must be going through right now because she's worried you're about to go do something terrible to yourself.
Right. I also loved that there was no villain in the movie. Many movies and I'm sure Hollywood was like, you got to spruce it up. There's got to be a villain, right? There's got to be like Lou has to cheat on him, or the guy, the mentor at the house with the deaf people, he's got to have like a dark secret, or there's got to be some villain. Or another thing is he's got to use drugs. I thought this whole movie was one big setup for him to have a massive relapse on heroin, but he never does. They had all the tension of someone who would relapse, and he never did.
Right. And then I'm so spoiled by movies that I actually was thinking, this is so silly, but I was thinking that when he got the things and they turn it on and it sounded all metally. I literally thought he was going to have some realization like discover a new sound. And then he was going to like play drums sort of like in a weird new way. And I'm thinking, maybe that.
Oh yeah.
Which I realize
that's like, the Hollywood. That's the Hollywood.
That's
version.
not even a Hollywood. Yeah. That's the super. But
no, that's
but in my mind,
we could definitely imagine a Hollywood after school special being like, look, he has this special ability now, and he's better than other drummers.
His senses are enhanced.
Yeah. And of course, a person of color lead, which was awesome. They did not have to have him. They could have had anyone. In fact, it was originally cast with a white guy who...
Like a skinhead type dude or something?
No, it was someone famous. And actually, Dakota Johnson was supposed to play Lou.
Really? And then they went like unknown. I like it.
Yeah.
Dude, unknowns are so much better for indie movies.
Yeah.
So much better.
Well, they're not so unknown, but more unknown than the big actor.
Unknown enough because like when you're like, imagine seeing, unless it's a part that fits what they're doing, but imagine, just as an extreme example, imagine what's his name, just like imagine Leonardo in this movie at this point in his career as the lead. He'd do a great job, but it's also like, it's Leonardo. Come on, what are we doing here?
Yeah,
I don't know. It's harder for me to buy it at that point.
So Riz, is it? I want to figure out how to pronounce his name. I don't know if they have it here, but is it Riz Ahmed or Riz Ahmed? Anyway, I love him. Do you remember what else he's been in, Berto?
No, I don't. He looked familiar, but I don't know.
So he was in Nightcrawler. He was the buddy to Jake Gyllenhaal. Yeah. He was in Rogue One. Huh. He was one of the rebels.
He was in Rogue One. Yes.
And the same year, 2016, he's in an HBO series called The Night Of, which I highly recommend. Really good. Really good.
I think you already told me about this
miniseries. Really good miniseries.
Yeah.
And he was also in The Sisters Brothers, which I don't think you've seen, Berto. It's a Western.
No, I have not.
With, is it Joaquin Phoenix and John C. Reilly? Very good movie, Sisters Brothers. But anyway, and he's been in a lot of other things as well. But he is a British actor and rapper. He's an British actual hip hop. Yeah, I think he was known for his hip hop before he was known for his, which is interesting. But I'm reading from, I believe, Wikipedia here. For 8 months, Ahmed prepared for the film by spending 2 hours a day learning American Sign Language, 2 hours a day, this is from IMDb, 2 hours a day learning American Sign Language, 2 hours a day in drum lessons, 2 hours a day with a personal trainer, and the remainder with his acting coach. So for several months, 8 months, he had to learn sign language, drums, all these sorts of things.
I've always felt that that's the best thing about being an actor.
You got to really dive in deep.
Yeah, like 8 hours a day getting better at things. That's awesome.
Yeah. During scenes where Ruben is struggling to reconcile with his hearing loss, the actor wore auditory blockers deep inside his ear canal that emitted white noise.
Wow.
So he made himself, he couldn't hear. He told USA Today, "I couldn't hear anything, including the sound of my own voice." After some time, he decided to forgo the sound blockers and simply immerse himself in deaf culture by communicating with the director and deaf cast almost exclusively through ASL.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty good commitment there. So he was, nominated for Best Actor for Oscar, and this was the first time. This was the first time that in the Oscars that the majority of the nominees were persons of color. So you had him, and then you had Chadwick Boseman, and you had Stephen Yeun for Minari. You also had Gary Oldman.
So do you think that they're just like, are they just like doing this to overcompensate? What's going on here?
Are you asking that seriously?
Yeah, I mean,
it could
they
be.
must, because it wasn't it just 2 years ago where everyone was white.
Yeah, Oscars so white or something. # Oscars so. So there's a number of factors that I've heard from people who know these sorts of things. One is yes, and probably rightfully so, in terms of like, hey, we should probably pay attention to people of color, and particularly since we're having an awakening in our country. But two, they've opened up the Oscar voting crowd to more young people and people of color. So
that makes sense.
When you add young people and people of, because Oscars were always old white people. And so...
And maybe the directors and movies are casting more people of color.
And that too, right. And producers or, movie producers are greenlighting more movies with people of color. You know what I mean? So it's...
Can we find a different phrase? I hate that phrase.
People of color?
Yeah.
Like you say brown people?
Skin has color. There's always color.
Brown people?
I guess.
Non-white people? Non-white.
They're not even white. No one is white.
Non-pink.
Anyways, okay.
Darker than pink?
Small detail.
There's BIPOC. How about BIPOC? Do you like BIPOC?
I forgot what that was.
Black Indigenous person of color.
Oh, okay.
The director, Darius Marder, also wrote The Place Beyond the Pines, which is a movie I keep telling you to watch, but you never watch.
That's right. Because I don't like recommendations. No, eventually I get around to things, and every time I'm pleasantly surprised, or not pleasantly surprised. I'm happy that I finally did it.
The Place Beyond the Pines, people, watch that movie. So yeah, can I recommend this movie? Yes. Just settle in for not a Hollywoodish movie. The performances are amazing. The way it looks. Okay, here was another nitpick I have. Before watching this movie, I heard that, oh my God, the sound design is so amazing. The sound design is so innovative. And did you think it was?
I mean, I didn't watch it in a theater with surround sound, so I don't know, but that's not something that stood out to me.
Right.
Obviously, the fact that they simulated what it's like to, lose your hearing and then hear with high pitch. But I didn't find that to be, that's not that hard. No. I didn't find that to be mind-blowing.
Yeah. It's not that hard to do. I think it's mind-blowing in that no one has done it as well before, maybe. But yeah, you and I who know sound production understand how it wouldn't be that hard to ask someone and really dial in the frequencies, or, like one of the things that when we're in his perspective is you hear that low rumbling, and then you kind of hear the bass of people talking, but it's not like he doesn't hear it all. There's something he's hearing, but it's this kind of low white rumbling noise. And that's not hard to create. Well,
that's one of those DJ knobs. Oh,
yeah. And so when I saw the movie, I was expecting it to be just a soundscape of like amazing innovation. And
interesting. I
and
hadn't even heard that.
Yeah.
And I definitely didn't think of that.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely good, but I didn't walk away going like, holy mind grapes. My brain is blown, you know?
Right.
So, but you know, it was good. I just wouldn't say it was like
when I watched Tenet, I was impressed with the audio. In fact, because people were dogging on it, like you can't hear the voices and stuff.
You couldn't. I was really annoyed with that.
I wasn't. I was like, I love this audio. And I honestly wonder if it varies dramatically from setup to setup. Because I watched it with my brother. Neither of us had a problem understanding. Both of us thought the audio was awesome. And it was in my setup, which is just, it's not surround sound, but it does have 2 stereo and the center channel and the sub. I don't know. It sounded great.
I mean, especially when the action got going, about half of the dialogue I didn't. And it was so important to hear the dialogue because it was confusing to begin with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's why I'm wondering, like, what the heck happened that some people, maybe the majority, I don't know, because for me, I never had that problem. That's so weird.
Yeah. All right, Berto, final word on The Sound of Metal.
It was impactful. I had a lot of feelings watching it. I wished that it had been a little tighter in the end. I would have easily given an 8. But overall, great acting. I learned a lot, actually, about the community, I felt. And so, totally, let's see more movies like this.
And that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.